The last time Miami won 10 games in a season, they regressed the following year. This time around, does Mario Cristobal have the ingredients to take this team even further?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen or your second listen and watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On this episode, we're going to talk about Miami's coaching changes and trajectory. Of course, most of that on the defensive side of the football. We're going to talk about how Mario Cristobal is keeping confidence high despite a tough end to the year. And yeah, we got to talk about Carson Beck. And folks, it's been way too long since we've connected with my doppelganger here, Gries, postcast king Jim Grieshaber is with us. Gries, let's start with that. I see in the backdrop, you got Carson Beck over there, who, and I know when the season ended, we had no idea who Miami's next starting quarterback would be. Now we know.
Yeah, we do, Alex. We do, and it's great to be back with you. Let me try to center myself here. Used to the solo shot with the postcast with the Heat these days, who are a fun team, regardless of all the stuff that's been going on around them. But it's been a great offseason, right? And you and I, we connected every week during the regular season and into what we thought was going to be a playoff run. And, you know, the bitter disappointment of the way that last season ended, it really took away from the magical year that it was when we really didn't expect anything like that as the season got underway. And we knew Cam Ward would be good. We were excited to have him. We had no idea he would play himself into the position he has played himself in, which we probably should have because of his path, if you look, you know, at his path throughout the years. But this is a lot different with Carson Beck, man. When I look at this, this is a kid who was once projected to be a high draft pick. This is a kid who was the quarterback coming into last season at Georgia, the guy that everybody was talking about. I mean, Quinn Ewers was one of them too. But he didn't have the year that everybody thought he would, and obviously had the surgery. But what a player. When you look at his career at Georgia, the big games he's played in, the performances. I mean, look at the 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech. He was fantastic. The Mississippi State game last year, he was unbelievable. He had a couple of games where you looked at him and you thought, wow. And then, of course, you think about the FSU game, and that's the one I love the most. I love to go back and watch that thing 100 times. I hope he does that again. But I think that the leadership of Carson Beck, just like Cam Ward last year, coming in from day one, his huddle, his team. And I really think that that's huge for Miami. And we've talked about this time and time again, Alex, with the portal and everything with the NILs. It's really changed the game for the University of Miami. And with that Notre Dame game right around the corner, it's real nice to have that experienced QB, even more so, I would argue, than Cam Ward when he came in. Really nice to have that leader for a game like that right out of the chute.
You know, I think about the moves Miami made in the offseason, and we'll talk about some of the coaching stuff as well, because I know, you know, we all felt a certain way about the defense last year. But in personnel, you know, Miami has brought in a ton of new defensive backs to try and revamp what was the weakest point on the field, bringing in a guy like Carson Beck to play quarterback. Gries, I know that, you know, you and I, we were pretty down at the end of the season. Like, we weren't very happy right after the Pop-Tart Bowl. We weren't happy after the Syracuse loss and everything.
Pop-Tart Bowl.
Yeah, my bad.
Just the words Pop-Tart Bowl alone, never mind the game itself, but just those words, they just bring back pain.
Yeah. Ugh. But like, how over the past 2 months, like how is your kind of your thermometer on Miami football? Like, how much has that changed? Because as down as I was 2 months ago, I'm feeling very hopeful for next year.
Well, I mean, Jason Taylor's still there coaching the defensive line, and Damian Lewis coming in, right, to coach the tackles, a former great Miami Hurricane from the Butch Davis era. Never forget him coming in and really dominating in the middle of that defense. So that's a nice upgrade. I like Zach Etheridge. I like that hire. And then Will Harris coming in. You know what? Anytime you take a good coach from the University of Florida, there's nothing bad about that. So the real question here is, and look, Corey Hatherman, he said all the right things. You know what I mean? So I really like him, and I like what he's done. And what he did at Minnesota, what he did at James Madison, top defenses in the country, top 3, actually top 2, as a matter of fact, a couple of times with those teams. That's very impressive. Obviously, I think the talent level is much higher at Miami than at Minnesota, at least I hope. And in that conference, you're playing a lot of run defense and things like that. And Miami was just gashed last year in all facets on the defensive side of the football. And it was extremely disappointing because we've talked about this, Alex, if they had any kind of defensive performance at all down the stretch, and they were playing with fire all year, and Cam bailed them out so many times. So I can't imagine the defense would be any worse than it was a year ago. And this was one of those things that I looked at and I thought, man, it was almost embarrassing at times to look at that unit and think, wow, there's a lot of talent on that side of the ball. But Alex, they just couldn't put it together. They just looked lost out there too many times. And you had some great leadership on that team too, on the defensive side of the ball from the player standpoint. So I'm interested to see what Hatherman can do with this unit. There's a lot of speed. There's a lot of talent. And I would say he's never had this kind of talent and these kinds of players before.
Yeah, and it's why one of our listeners asked me a couple weeks ago if there's ever been an example of a new defensive coordinator coming in for an average or not so good defense and really making them elite in 1 year. And my answer was Hatherman literally just did that at Minnesota. I mean, he took over. They were 70th or 69th ranked in America before he took over. He got them into the top 5. So, I mean, you just hired a guy who has actually done that before, Gries. And, when we just to take it back to Carson Beck, and then I'll bring it back to the defense. I mean, we were talking off air about how, Carson Beck maybe not like a savior, but nor should he be. Miami needs to play complementary football. And I think Carson can do great work with this offense, but we've got to have an actual defense this year. And Hatherman has shown that he can turn around a defense in 1 year.
Yeah, he has. And that's something that I really look at and I go, wow, this could be a special unit. When you look at what the offense is, I think, going to be capable of, I really don't think the offense is going to slow down at all. Number 1 offense in the country for much of last season. And when you look at what Cam Ward did, I expect Carson Beck to come in and put up huge numbers, and I expect the offense to be great. But on the defensive side of the ball, Alex, you're there every day in spring practice, obviously getting started. But who have you seen? Every year certain players just take that leap, and you look at them from a year ago and they come in and you go, wow, that dude is just different. He's going to be a star this year. Who are those guys that you've seen, if anybody?
Justin Scott and Armondo Blount on the defensive line are two. Okay. We're talking about returning guys. Those are 2 that really stand out for me. At linebacker, I think Wesley Basaint is going to be good. He has been good at Miami, but he's going to really have an even bigger role this year because the last 2 years, Kiko was the guy who was like the leader of that unit. It's got to be Wes. It's got to be the leader of that unit this year. So far, so good with him. Bobby Pruitt and Popo Aguirre have looked pretty good there. And then in the defensive backfield, it's really obviously we expect, OJ Frederic to hopefully build on what he did last year. I like Xavier Lucas, who was like the highest profile, transfer, especially with the whole saga that came with that. I think he's fit the bill. He's looked really good so far. So, I think I'm seeing, and again, like this, Gries, and I want everyone to know this, that, we're talking about the first handful of practices before the pads come on. So I'm just telling you what I'm seeing so far, but I think there's a handful of younger players on that defense who look like they're developing, which is the key, Gries, because for so many years and recently, unfortunately, Miami has not shown the ability to develop players. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we're getting more of that now. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation on Miami's defensive line. And I want to put Gries on the spot and get his prediction for the upcoming 2025 Miami Hurricane season. You want to keep it locked right here on Locked On Canes. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. Folks, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We are also proudly brought to you by Nissan. Folks, we're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can literally carry the whole team. Plus, the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I host that show. We'll be talking with our good lawyer friend, Doug Rohan of Rohan Law, to recap the settlement the ACC just made with Florida State and Clemson. Make sure you check out Locked On ACC free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
Yeah, and on the defensive side of the ball, revamping like that. And I look, I mean, with Jason Taylor and Damian Lewis, how could the defensive line not be a strength for this team? I'm really, it starts up front. Alex, as you know, games are won and lost up front. That's where we were playing with fire last year. And on offense, I'll say the same thing. And I definitely was not a big fan of Dawson last year either, to be honest with you. And it's tough to even say that with the numbers that they put up and the performances on offense. But at times I thought they were, lackluster, and I thought that they could have been better from a play calling standpoint. And I even think Cam Ward slipped a little bit toward the end. But when I think about the defensive line and the offensive line, this is where games are won and lost. And last year, those two units were, I would say, the weakest units on the field when that side of the ball was on the field. So on offense, the offensive line was the weak link. On defense, it was the defensive line. And that's where everything fell apart. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I really feel like the defensive line in particular, that's been a huge strength every time the University of Miami has been a dominant program. It really has started with the defensive line. When you think of the Jerome Brown years and Russell Maryland and all those great Cortez Kennedy, all those great defensive tackles. Damian Lewis, not quite on that level, but he was a really good player at Miami. And then, of course, Jason Taylor, the pedigree. So I would expect the defensive line, and I would hope that the defensive line would get back to being one of the real strengths of the entire team.
Yeah, in fact, I talked about that this morning, Gries, and I look at a couple guys that I think, and they're, the ones I expect to be starting, on the edges in most downs, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. I have every reason to believe that they're both going to have big years. Obviously everyone talks about Bain, like a kind of a down year last year, but he missed 5 out of the 12 regular season games. And for the first game, Florida didn't finish that game. So you're talking about him essentially playing half the season, playing hurt for some of that, still managed 3.5 sacks for a guy who missed half the season. It's not terrible. Akeem Mesidor had 5.5 sacks last year, playing primarily out of position. Like they promised he's going to play full-time on the edge this year, which is where he fits better and he's more comfortable. And he had 5.5 sacks, and he didn't have a fully healthy offseason last year. He's having a fully healthy offseason now. Bain, by the way, spoke to the media after practice today. He's lost 10 pounds from last year, which I think he needed, because I think maybe Gries Bain might have kind of over gambled on putting on weight last year, maybe made himself a little bit slower. He's getting back to his freshman year size now. So I expect both Bain and Mesidor to bounce back.
Yeah, and you think about being the rookie of the year in 2023, 77 sacks in high school, the Nat Moore Award winner, Ruben Bain Jr., and obviously he's a great talent. And I think it's the fact that you led with him missing all those games last year, that's important for people to realize. And I think people tend to forget he missed all those games, but not only that, not 100% most of the time when he did play. And we've seen him when he is healthy and when he is in the lineup, what a difference it makes for the defense. They're a completely different unit. And I think about the edge rushers at the University of Miami over the years. There have been some real good ones, but it's really been about the tackles. And of course, I didn't mention Warren Sapp, right? He's in Colorado, so never mind him. But it's and I whatever. But my point is, when I look at Damian Lewis, he has a really important job with those tackles, man, because the run stuffing and the ability to get heat on the quarterback from right up the middle with guys like Warren Sapp was great with that, Russell Maryland, and just literally controlling the line of scrimmage. Do we have anybody like that right now that's standing out in your mind, or anybody you think could fill that kind of a role? Maybe not that level, but that kind of a role.
It's got to be Justin Scott. I mean, he's the former 5-star recruit, and he's built different, Gries. Like you can tell, like when you watch him, that he looks like someone who's gonna be great, right? And played a little bit last year as a true freshman. But Scott, to me, is the one who he's got to, and I think he will hopefully become like the next great in that lineage of defensive tackles. And it's not to say he's the only one that I like. I mean, I thought Ahmad Moten had a good finish to last year. I think Josh Horton is putting on some size and looking like he can step into a bigger role. But the one who's got the potential through the roof, like when you talk about every physical tool to be the next great interior defensive lineman, Justin Scott is the guy who theoretically checks off all those boxes. He's just got to go out there and develop and make it happen.
Yeah, and at 6'4", too, getting the pterodactyl arms up there, batting down balls, changing the trajectory of throws. I mean, I love that up the middle, and that's something that, it's not to have that kind of height and that kind of size, 300 pounds, that's pretty unique, and he's got everything, and I agree that he could be that guy. And then, those guys coming off the edge, it could be really special. It really could be it. And I think the secondary, it was a little bit unfair last year they didn't get a ton of heat, and they had times the defensive line would play really well and get a lot of heat on the QB. I don't want to make it sound like it was a terrible year all the way across the board, but the secondary needs a lot more help from the defensive line, and I think the secondary was a little bit better than it looked last year.
Yeah, and well, they also we knew heading into last year they had paper thin depth in the secondary, and then had guys injured. That depth got tested. I mean, Damari Brown missed most of the year last year, which was unfortunate. Jadis Richard picked up an injury. Jaden Harris started the year. He played well against Florida, and then kind of became a liability after that. There just wasn't no, and like you said, the defensive line didn't do them enough favors in applying consistent pressure. But a unit that we thought maybe wouldn't be all that good last year got exposed, except for OJ Frederic was the one who, he played really outside of the Syracuse game where he had some tough matchups. Frederic played well the whole year. And, Mario did what he had to do in terms of addressing that unit in a big way. And some of the transfers coming in, I mentioned Xavier Lucas. I've seen a lot of Charles Brantley so far in spring. I also, not that you want to rely on these guys too much, but I think there's some true freshmen coming in that show some promise as well. I like what I see a lot from Chris Ewald Jr. And something to think about with Ewald, Gries, is, I know he was primarily a corner in high school, but I've seen him getting some work at safety. Now, you're going to cross-train some guys, so I try not to read too much into it, but I see Ewald getting some work at safety and looking really natural at that spot. So I wonder if he's someone who could maybe get into that rotation, if not this year, become, a guy down the road.
Man, that's interesting. I've always been of the belief, and we've seen it over the years. And by the way, congrats to Coach Jimmy Johnson on his retirement from Fox Sports, and obviously a great coach at the University of Miami. And it started with Howard, and then Jimmy, and then Dennis. And, the speed in the secondary at Miami has always been just unbelievable. But I've always been of the belief, Alex, that you take your best playmakers and your best athletes and you find a way to get them on the field. So playing them at safety, get your best athletes out there. And I think that's what that's all about.
And that's what Corey Hatherman is all about. And Will Harris as well. I know one of the things that Harris mentioned when he had his news conference last week after getting hired was, yeah, we're going to look at guys in our defensive secondary. As of right now, it's like a blank slate. I'm going to see maybe there's a certain guy you might think is a corner, but we'll try him at the nickel. We'll try him at safety and see how. It's exactly what we see happening so far. And Corey Hatherman, when he spoke to us midweek, he basically said right now they're playing, in his words, positionless defense because they're trying players out. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll see a defensive tackle, lining up at corner or something, but it does mean on the defensive line, you might see some guys playing inside and outside. You might see some safeties playing corner and vice versa. Will linebackers playing Mike. We've seen a little bit of that with Wesley Besaint so far. So they're definitely, Gries, they're trying to do exactly what you said. They're trying to figure out where everybody plugs in best so you can try to get your best 11 guys on the field.
Yeah, no doubt. And you talked about you've just talked about it. Day 2, defensive backfield dominant. The receivers, it might be more of a reflection on the receivers. And I don't know. The receivers are always a strong point at the University of Miami and with a guy like Beck, but so far so good with the DBs, right, Alex? And, you always hope that under a guy, he comes in and his track record's unbelievable. I think Corey and then bringing in Will, that's going to really help that backfield be better. I think that will be the most improved unit. And I led with this, that I thought at times it was unfair with the secondary last year. I really think they're a tremendous bright spot coming into this season. I look for big things out of the secondary this year. A lot more turnovers. We were talking about last year, where were the defensive touchdowns, special teams touchdowns never got, but where were the defensive opportunities like the Ed Reed type play with Matt Walters at Boston College, or things we didn't see anything like that last year.
Yeah, and I know that's something Hatherman wants more of, and he emphasizes turnovers, but who doesn't? I know it's fair to say, of course, every defensive coordinator wants, to force takeaways and stuff. So I know it's not rocket science to say that they got to go out there and prove it, but he's got a pretty good track record of his defenses doing that at previous stops. And, and as far as receivers go, one guy that the DBs have had problems with, but I think it's more a reflection on this receiver, is Jojo Trader. And that's someone. Yeah, you may have heard, Gries, when Cam Ward was at the Combine, he was asked who the next great receiver is going to be at Miami, and he said Jojo Trader is the guy he thinks is going to be one of the best in the country this coming season. And he's definitely the guy who's looked like the alpha in practice. Number 0 is the one we always look for. He's usually the guy who's making those highlight reel catches. Last year it was, the last couple of years really, it was Xavier Restrepo was usually the one who would make the MVP type of catches in practice. So far, it's been Jojo Trader. He's been really good there.
Yeah, and all the hype and the national media has noticed as well. He's on almost everybody's breakout star list, and I'm really excited to see what he does on the field this fall. But after him, huge drop, or what are you seeing so far?
I'm seeing a lot of opportunity. I don't know if I could say huge drop, but there's not, in Trader included, is not all that experienced, right?
Sophomore,
we're not seeing CJ Daniels is still recovering from something. He's the most senior member. He's a 6-year guy, transfer from LSU, but he's not fully ready to go yet. Malachi Toney, a true freshman, has actually looked good. Dalen Upshaw, same thing. Ray Joseph, has seen some good stuff from him so far. So it's one of those things where I don't necessarily know if there's a huge drop off after Trader, but we're not going to know till we know. Other guys have been making plays in practice, but man, I think it's going to be probably after spring break. So about a week and a half from now is when we're going to start to see some pads come on. That's what I want to see, especially for some of these really young guys, the freshmen, when you're just playing in shorts and shells, you can do certain things out there. When the contact heats up, who's going to bring it? So, man,
right.
I can't tell you enough, Gries, how much I appreciate your time. Before I let you run, do you have a way too early win-loss prediction for next year? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No,
I know I'm
don't.
putting you on the spot.
I really don't.
It is way too early.
No, but I would say I want to go undefeated and win the whole thing. That would be my, and a playoff berth. That's what I would say, Alex. I don't know about wins and losses. I'd say no more than 2 losses is what I would say.
Yeah.
And a playoff berth this year. But, that Notre Dame game, huge with the run that they made. last year, and I thought we'd see them in the playoffs, and it didn't end up happening, obviously. But man, to start with a game like that sets the tone for the season. The Florida win last year did that for this team, and when you look at that win at the time, we didn't know how good Florida would be or not, but it really was. It set the tone. In-state rival school over the years, and you're competing for most of the same recruits, and to start with a win like that this year with Notre Dame would be even bigger to just give them that launch. So a loss in this game won't be the end of the world, but a win, then you're looking at a potential undefeated season. But a loss in that game, maybe 2 losses and a deep playoff run, you win that Notre Dame game, I'm going to have national title hopes.
Yeah, and I know they went 10-2 last year and fell short of the playoff. I think 10 wins this year would probably be good enough because it's tougher schedule. I think 10 wins this year, you probably get to the ACC championship game, and then you have your opportunity to make the college football playoff. And man, I know Gries is out there still doing his postcasts because he comes on after Miami Heat games, which is fantastic. And when baseball comes back, but football, I cannot wait to hear Gries on the postcast again for the Canes this upcoming season, for the Dolphins. Hopefully they both give you great years, Gries, so you can come on and be happy instead of having to explain losses. Let's explain wins again.
Yeah, last year was tough, man. Dolphins and Canes, the way the season ended with the Canes, and the Dolphins could never really get it going last season. And I think both teams could have outstanding years, and I'll be excited. And by the way, Alex, congratulations. I want to say something about you day in and day out. I see you down there at the University of Miami. You're constantly cranking out episodes. Top 5 podcast on the network, Locked On Canes.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Top 5. I just saw that. It was out in a company-wide newsletter. It's top 5 college show is Locked On Canes. Top 5. All of our college shows, you are top 5, my friend. So, and I mean top 5 in terms of views, downloads, and just a tremendous job always. And I saw you with Coach Solinger down there the other day. We didn't get a chance to talk about it much, but I'm expecting big things from the RB's room this year too.
And by the way, let me just let people know. So, and I don't think Coach Solinger would mind me saying this, but when I chatted with him down there, this was like not on a show or anything. It's just I ran into him at spring practice, and he, as you guys know, he's very high on Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle. He's also Coach Solinger. He's very complimentary of like one of the unsung heroes in that running back room is walk-on Terrell Walden, who's like when you watch him in practice, obviously he doesn't get many opportunities to get into games, but he works so hard and he looks good. Like when you're watching, you don't think this guy's a walk on it. Coach Solinger, he's got the eye for talent and he's very complimentary of Terrell Walden. So I'll send a shout out to Walden as well, who's a Miami legacy in his own right. And man, Coach Solinger is great people. Jim Grieshaber is great people. You want to follow him. I see you got a new X handle. So it's at Jim Gries _ is where you find him.
There you go. Jim Gries _ Gries. It's unbelievable, man. I can't wait. I love the Heat. I love doing that. The Marlins coming up, but I really have that soft spot in my heart for the University of Miami, which we both call home, Alex, and I'm excited for a great year, and I love watching you every day to get ready for it.
Thank you so much, man. You as well. I love watching the postcast. Guys, keep it locked right here. We'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. By the way, Hoodie Girl wants to come on and give her perspective on Jay Lucas as the new head basketball coach. We had JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils giving the Duke side of it. Our pal Hoodie Girl wants to weigh in, so we'll talk to her tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.